Have you ever stopped to consider how something really basic, like a modified pipe, could actually be a key player in keeping our infrastructure working, especially with, our climate changing?
Hmm.
Welcome to the FBS podcast. We're doing another deep dive today looking at practical solutions in forest business and well beyond.
And today, yeah, we're zoning in on a specific USDA Forest Service document. It's General Technical Report NE 184. The title is Using Open-Top Pipe Culverts to Control Surface Water on Steep Road Grades. The author's James N. Kashendrafer.
Exactly. So we're going to unpack this report, look at how these things are designed, how they're put in, and critically, do they actually work for managing water?
Right. And the goal here, really, for this FBS podcast deep dive is to show how these culverts offer a practical, pretty tough way to handle surface water on forest roads, especially those tricky, steep bits.
Mm-hmm.
And this ties right into what the Forest Business School is about, helping you, the mid-career professionals listening, level up your skills by understanding these kinds of innovative, adaptive practices.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we should definitely mention the cost info in this paper is pretty dated. I mean, the manuscript was from 1994.
Right. Ancient history in terms of dollars.
Yeah, exactly. But the technical stuff, the engineering principles, still very relevant today. So we're focusing on that, the lasting technical side.
Good call. And the core problem it tackles. It's that basic need. How do you effectively control surface water on steep, unpaved forest roads? Places where the usual methods, like, say, broad-based dips, just aren't quite right.
Okay, so let's start there. Standard road design often has, like, a crown and ditches, right? Why isn't that always enough when you get onto really steep grades?
Well, it's mostly about gravity and water speed. On those steeper slopes, water just picks up so much speed.
Uh-huh.
And that speed means more force. It can overwhelm simple ditches, cause a lot more erosion on the road surface, wash material away. It just doesn't get channeled properly sometimes.
Okay, and what about broad-based dips then? They seem pretty common. Why are they less ideal on the steep stuff?
They are common, yeah.
Yeah.
But research mentioned in the report, going back quite a ways actually, shows they get less effective when the grade gets much over, say, 10%.
Ah.
Think about a fully loaded logging truck trying to navigate a dip on a steep hill. It can be difficult, maybe even a bit risky. Plus, actually building good dips that drain right on those slopes, that's technically challenging.
Right, construction challenges too. Okay, so traditional methods hit a wall. That brings us to this idea, the open-top culvert. What exactly is it? What does it look like?
So, picture this. It's basically a piece of used, heavy-duty steel pipe. The report says about 5/16 of an inch thick wall.
Okay, thick pipe.
Yeah, heavy stuff. And the key thing is, slots have been cut into the top surface of the pipe. That's the open top part.
Slots. Interesting. Why are the slots? What's the function?
The idea is pretty straightforward. Surface water flowing across the road hits the pipe, falls through those slots, and gets channeled inside the pipe.
Ah, intercept.
Exactly. The pipe then carries that water off the road, usually discharging it somewhere safer down the slope. The report specifically mentions these are for minimum standard roads on steep sections. So think lower traffic, unpaved forest roads.
And the paper makes a point about these steel ones being an improvement over, like, older wooden versions.
Oh, definitely. Compared to traditional wooden open-top culverts, these steel ones are way tougher. Wood rots, breaks easily,
Yeah.
Steel resists damage much better. And importantly, they're supposed to be relatively easier to clean out when debris builds up. Keeping them clear is key, obviously.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk fabrication. How do you actually make these? Cut slots and heavy pipe. That sounds like a job.
It is, but the process described is pretty direct. You mark out where the slots go on the pipe first, then using a cutting torch, you cut two parallel lines about 3 inches apart along the top.
3 inches wide.
Yeah. And figure 1 in the report shows this layout really clearly.
So it's not just one long continuous slot running down the pipe.
No, it's patterned. Figure 1 shows it. You've got like a 24-inch open slotted section, the 6-inch solid section, then another 24 inches open, and so on.
Ah, alternating.
Right. Alternating open and solid bits. And they also shape the road bed a little bit, bevel it right around the culvert to kind of funnel the water towards the slots.
And did it work? The report mentions a 2-year evaluation.
Yeah, apparently. Quite well. Over those 2 years, they found the culverts effectively intercepted surface water, even during pretty big storms.
And the 3-inch slot width? Any issues with, like, tires getting stuck or damaged?
Surprisingly, no. The study found that 3-inch width didn't cause tire damage, but it was wide enough to let them get in there and clean out any muck or debris that collected.
Right, cleaning. You mentioned that. Did they have a special way to do it?
They did. They actually developed a simple tool. It's shown in Figure 3. Basically, a 5-foot piece of 34-inch pipe, bent at the end, with a sort of shaped metal scoop welded on, made from another bit of pipe, actually.
Huh.
Yeah, apparently it worked better than just using a standard pick or mattock to get the debris out of those slots.
Okay, so you've got your slotted pipe. How do you actually get it into the road? The report mentioned two ways.
That's right. Two main installation methods were used and documented. One was doing it by hand manual installation. Figure 4 shows that. Guys digging the trench, places the pipe.
Okay.
The other involved using a small bulldozer. That's in Figure 5.
Pros and cons for each, I assume.
Absolutely. The manual method, well, it disturbed the existing road surface less. You can be more precise with the depth and, importantly, the skew angle.
Skew. We'll come back to that.
Yeah. But manual was obviously more labor-intensive. The bulldozer method could be quicker, potentially cheaper in terms of labor hours.
But maybe messier.
Exactly. More disturbance to the roadbed and maybe harder to get that perfect skew angle consistently.
Okay, dimensions. How long were these culverts usually, and what diameter pipe did they use?
On average, the culverts they installed were about 20 feet long. The roads themselves averaged around 15 feet wide where these went in.
Right.
And they used both 8-inch and 10-inch diameter pipe, but they generally ended up preferring the 8-inch size.
Any particular reason for favoring the 8-inch?
Yeah, a few good reasons. First, the 8-inch pipe was usually cheaper to get hold of. Remember, they were using used pipe. Second, it needed a shallower trench dug in the road. And third, it was just lighter. Easier for the crew to lift and position by hand compared to the heavier 10-inch pipe.
Makes sense, especially for manual installation. Okay, back to skew. You said that angle was important. Why?
Super important. Skew is the angle the pipe sits at across the road, relative to straight across. They aim to maximize the downslope skew. The report mentions angles from 25 up to 45 degrees, averaging around 36 degrees.
Why so angled?
It's all about self-cleaning. Think of it like angling a rain gutter more steeply. That angle helps the water flow through the pipe faster and more forcefully.
Carrying debris with it.
Precisely. It encourages the pipe to flush itself out naturally, reducing how often you need to manually clean those slots.
Clever. And how did they actually bed the pipe in the trench? Just drop it in?
No, a bit more care than that. They prepared a level bed for it using about half an inch of gravel.
Okay.
Once the pipe was positioned correctly, with the right skew, they'd hand tamp more gravel, and the fill dirt they dug out tightly along the sides of the pipe. Pack it in well to keep it stable.
All right, installation done. The big question. How well did they actually work out there on those steep roads?
The findings were pretty positive. The report states they effectively controlled surface water on grades ranging from 8% all the way up to 19%.
19%? That's steep.
It really is. The average grade they were tested on was around 12%. And, thinking about today, this kind of proven method is exactly what we need for resilience, adaptable ways to handle more intense runoff from changing weather.
Good point. But the report is careful to call them a supplementary device, not a primary one. What's the difference mean in practice?
It means you wouldn't necessarily use them everywhere. They're best seen as an extra tool in the toolbox, specifically for those unavoidable steep sections where maybe other things like broad-based dips just aren't suitable or practical.
Like maybe in really rocky ground.
Exactly. The report mentions that specifically. If you've got super rocky terrain where digging out a proper broad-based dip would be a nightmare, these culverts offer a good alternative.
Okay, one thing that occurs to me is, where does all that water go? It collects the water, channels it. Then what? Does it cause erosion where it comes out?
That's a critical consideration, yeah.
Yeah.
Outlet erosion. The water usually discharges onto the top of the road fill slope.
Which could wash away.
Potentially, yes.
Okay.
So erosion protection is needed there. Most often, according to the report, they use native stone riprap, just loose rock piled below the outlet. Figure 8 shows that. It helps break up the energy of the water flow.
Did that always work?
It worked reasonably well, but they noted on really steep fill slopes, keeping that riprap stable could be difficult. It might get undermined or washed away itself over time.
So was there another option for those really steep spots? I think you mentioned something about plastic pipe.
Correct, yeah. Figure 7 shows an alternative they tried. They attached a half-round section of plastic culvert pipe onto the outlet of the steel pipe.
Like an extension chute?
Kind of, yeah.
Mm.
To carry the water further down the slope before releasing it, spreading it out more, and reducing that concentrated erosion right at the pipe exit.
Interesting adaptation. Were there any conditions where these culverts just didn't work so well? Limitations?
Yes, definitely some limitations noted. They weren't great on roads that were already badly rutted.
Ah.
Or if trucks were tracking tons of mud onto the road, the slots could just get clogged up quickly. The roads they tested these on tended to have a fair bit of gravel or rock, making them naturally more resistant to getting rutted up.
Any other cautions?
A couple of practical ones. Bulldozer tracks, the cleats, could potentially damage the slots if the dozer drove over them repeatedly. So they recommended laying down boards or logs across the culvert during installation if lots of passes were needed.
Right. Protect the slots.
And road grader operators doing maintenance need to know where these things were. A grader blade could easily catch and damage one if the operator wasn't careful.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And finally, after grading, the slots would likely need a quick cleanout.
Makes sense. Okay, let's touch on cost. We know the numbers are old, 1994 old, but can we still get a feel for the relative economics?
Yeah, Table 2 gives that breakdown. And again, massive grain of salt on the dollar amounts, but relatively.
Yeah.
Preparing one culvert, the used pipe cost, labor for cutting, torch fuel was around $121 back then.
Okay.
Manual installation added about $72 labor, gravel, vehicle costs. Bulldozer installation was cheaper on paper, about $46 for the dozer operator time, labor, gravel, etc.
And protecting the out.
Riprap added about $27. Using that half-round plastic extension was slightly more, maybe $36.
So total installed cost.
Including riprap, roughly $220 total for manual installation versus about $194 with the bulldozer. But interestingly, the report notes that even though manual cost a bit more,
It resulted in a better installation.
that was their assessment, yeah. More precise control over placement and skew, less disturbance. So maybe worth the extra cost sometimes.
Interesting trade-off. Okay, stepping back again. How does this specific technique, open-top culverts, connect to the bigger picture of adapting to climate change?
It's a really direct link, actually. We're seeing and expecting more intense rainfall events, right?
Yeah, it seems that way.
More intense rain means more surface runoff, faster runoff, especially on slopes. So having effective, resilient drainage systems becomes even more crucial. These culverts, designed for tough spots, help manage that extra water, protect the road, prevent erosion, sending sediment into streams. It's exactly the kind of adaptation needed.
So it's about building resilience into the infrastructure, using methods that can handle more extreme conditions.
Precisely. Small-scale solutions, maybe, but part of a much larger strategy for keeping forest road networks functional and minimizing environmental impact in a changing world.
And it really drives home the point about needing practical, adaptable tools.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which, again, ties back to the Forest Business School's mission equipping professionals, equipping you listening with this kind of practical knowledge to manage resources sustainably as conditions evolve.
So boiling it all down, what was the report's main takeaway? Cohenderford's final word.
The core conclusion was pretty clear. Yes, these open-top pipe culverts are an effective, viable option for controlling surface water on those steep, minimum standard roads where broad-based dips aren't the best choice.
And performance-wise?
Their performance for temporary water control was found to be comparable to a properly installed graveled broad-based dip. So pretty good.
Oh, okay, great. So let's wrap up with the key takeaways from this deep dive.
Sure. First, open-top pipe culverts are a durable, relatively simple way to handle water on steep forest roads. Good alternative to broad-based dips in certain situations. Second, that slotted design with the right skew angle. It helps them clean themselves out, to some extent, reducing maintenance needs.
Right, the self-cleaning aspect.
Third, installation method matters. Manual gives more control, but costs a bit more. Bulldozer is cheaper, but potentially rougher. A trade-off to consider. But the basic concept is resilient.
And for you, our listeners, getting familiar with these kinds of practical, maybe slightly old school but effective, engineering fixes gives you real insight into managing infrastructure, especially as weather patterns get more extreme. Adaptability is key. Knowing these techniques boosts your value in sustainable land management.
Which brings us to a final thought to leave you with. We talked about how the costs in this 1994 report are dated, but the technical ideas are still solid. So thinking about that, what other established, maybe even overlooked engineering concepts from the past could be dusted off, maybe tweaked and redeployed to help us tackle today's challenges in managing resources and keeping infrastructure resilient in our changing climate? Something to
Hey, this is Steve Bick with the Forest Business School. Thanks for listening to the FBS podcast, and I hope you will subscribe. The truth is, these deep dives barely scratch the surface of some of the topics we cover in the Forest Business School programs, and the podcast is a way of reaching a wider audience. Check out my website at vtfbs.com for more information. Reach out if you want to talk about one of the FBS programs or have custom training or project needs that you'd like to discuss. Again, thanks for listening to the FBS podcast.